Maybe your headmaster is simply having a midlife crisis, pronounced Raj. Stopping off at the newsagent's shop on the way home from school, Joe had told Raj about the curious events of the day. Mr. Dust is about 100. He's got to be more than midway through his life, said Joe. What I mean, clever clogs, continued Raj, is that perhaps he was just trying to feel young again. But it's the most expensive motorbike in the world. It costs $250,000. He's a teacher, not a footballer. How could he afford it? Proclaimed Joe. I don't know. I'm no detective like Miss Marbles or the great Sherlock Holmes, said Raj, before looking around his shop and lowering his voice to a whisper. Joe, I need to ask you something in the strictest confidence. Joe lowered his voice. Go ahead. This is very embarrassing, Joe, whispered Raj. But do you use your dad's special toilet paper? Yes, of course, Raj. Everyone does. Well, I've been using his new one for a few weeks now. The mint-flavored wipes? Asked Joe. Yes, and my bottom has turned purple. Purple? Said Joe with a shocked laugh. This is a very serious matter, chided Raj. He looked up suddenly. One copy of the Daily Mail and a packet of Rolos, that'll be $3. Be careful with those rollers on your dentures, Mr. Little. He waited for the pensioner to leave the shop. Ding went the bell on the door. I didn't see him there. He must have been lurking behind the quavers, said Raj, a little shaken at what the pensioner might have heard. You are joking, aren't you, Raj? Said Joe. I'm deadly serious, Joe. Show me then. I can't show you. We've just met. But let me draw you a graph. A graph? As the boy looked, Raj grabbed some paper and pens and drew this graph. Wow, that is purple. Is it painful? It is sore. Have you seen a doctor? Yes, and he said hundreds of people in the area have purple bottoms. Oh no, said Joe. This isn't a laughing matter, Joe. There was hurt in his eyes that his bottom had become such a subject of mockery. No, sorry, said Joe. I think I will stop using your dad's new wipes and go back to the shiny white my wife used to buy. I'm sure it isn't the wipe, said Joe. What else could it be? Look, Raj, I better go. I've invited my girlfriend over later. Ooh, girlfriend is it now? The pretty girl you came in with when I sold you the ice lolly, said the newsagent brightly. Yes, that's her, said Joe shyly. Well, I don't know if she's really my girlfriend, but we've been spending a lot of time together. Well, have a lovely evening. Thanks. Arriving at the door, Joe turned back to the newsagent. He couldn't help himself. Good luck with your bottom. Thank you, my friend. Out of my shop. Out, said Raj. Ding! Cheeky boy, muttered the newsagent with a smile as he rearranged his curly-whirlies. Bumfresh Towers pulsated with music. Coloured lights spun in every room. Hundreds of people swarmed around the house. This was a party that was going to get complaints about the noise from people in Sweden. Joe had no idea that there was a party at the house tonight. Dad hadn't mentioned anything at breakfast, and Joe had invited Lauren over for dinner. As it was a Friday night, they could stay up late too. It was going to be perfect. Sorry, I had no idea about this, said Joe, as they approached the giant stone steps at the front of the house. It's cool. I love a party, replied Lauren. As darkness fell and strangers tumbled out of the house, clutching bottles of champagne, Joe took Lauren's hand and led her through the huge oak front door. Wow, this is some house, shouted Lauren over the music. What? Said Joe. Lauren put her mouth to Joe's ear so she could be heard. I said, wow, this is some house. But Joe still couldn't really hear. Feeling the heat of her breath so close to him, he stopped listening for a moment. Thank you, shouted Joe back into Lauren's ear. Joe searched all over the house for his dad. It was impossible to find him. Every room was oozing with people. Joe didn't recognize a single one of them. Who on earth were they all? Guzzling cocktails and gobbling finger food like there was no tomorrow. Being short, Joe really found it hard to see over them. His dad wasn't in the snooker room, he wasn't in the dining room, he wasn't in the massage room, he wasn't in the library, he wasn't in the other dining room, he wasn't in his bedroom, he wasn't in the reptile house. "Let's try the pool room," shouted Joe in Lauren's ear. "You've got a pool? Cool," she shouted. Some party guests had either dived or fallen into the pool and were bobbing around in the water. Joe enjoyed swimming, and the thought that none of these people looked like they would get out of the pool clouded his mind. Just then he spotted his dad, wearing a pair of swimming trunks and his curly afro toupee, and dancing to a completely different rhythm than what the music was playing. Covering the wall behind him was a vast mural of strangely muscle-bound version of himself, reclining in a thong. The real Mr. Spud boogied badly in front of it, looking more like a beach ball that had been rolled in hair. "What's going on, Dad? Who are all these people, your friends?" "No, I hired them in. $500 each, partyguests.com. "What's the party for, Dad?" "Well, I know you'll be pleased to know that Sapphire and I have got engaged," shouted Mr. Spud. "What the?" said Joe, not able to disguise his shock. "It's great news, isn't it?" yelled Dad. Still the music boomed. Joe didn't want to believe it. Did the hand model really have to be his new mum? "I asked her yesterday and she said no. But then I asked her again today and gave her a great big diamond ring and she said yes." "Congratulations, Mr. Spud," said Lauren. "So you must be a friend of my son's from school," said Mr. Spud. "That's right, Mr. Spud," replied Lauren. "Call me Len, please," said Mr. Spud with a smile. "And you must meet Sapphire." "Sapphire!" he shouted. Sapphire tottered over her in her shocking yellow high heels and even more shocking yellow bikini. "Would you show Joe's friend the engagement ring, my gorgeous lady love of all time? $20 million just for the diamond." Joe spied the diamond on his soon-to-be stepmother's finger. It was the size of a small bungalow. Her left arm was dangling lower than the right with the weight of it. "Oh, it's so heavy I can't lift my hand, but if you bend down you can see it," said Sapphire. Lauren stepped closer to get a better look. "Haven't I seen you somewhere before?" Sapphire asked. Mr. Spud leaped in. "No, you haven't, my one true love." "Yes, I have," said Sapphire. "No, my angel cake." "Oh, my goodness, I know where I've seen you." "I said shut it, my chocolate-sprinkled princess," said Mr. Spud. "You've done that ad for pot noodles," Sapphire exclaimed. Joe turned to Lauren, who looked at the floor. "It's good, you know the one, Joe," continued Sapphire, "for the new sweet and sour flavor, the one where she has to do karate to stop people from nicking it." "You are an actress," spluttered Joe. The advert was coming back into focus in his mind. Her hair was a different color, and she wasn't wearing an all-in-one yellow catsuit, but it was Lauren all right. "I better go," said Lauren. "And did you lie about having a boyfriend too?" demanded Joe. "Goodbye, Joe," said Lauren before weaving past the guests in the pool room as she ran off. "Lauren!" shouted Joe after her. "Let her go, son," said Mr. Spud sadly. But Joe raced after her and caught up with her just as she reached the stone steps. He grabbed her arm harder than he had anticipated, and she turned around in pain. "Ow!" "Why did you lie to me?" Joe stammered. "Just forget it, Joe," said Lauren. She suddenly seemed a different person. Her voice was more posh now, and her face less kind. The twinkle in her eye had definitely gone, and the glow around her had turned into a shadow. "You don't want to know." "Don't want to know what?" "Look, if you must know, your dad saw me on that pot noodle advert and called my agent. Said you were unhappy at school and paid me to be your friend. It was all fine until you tried to kiss me." She skipped down the steps and ran off down the long drive. Joe watched her go for a few moments before the pain in his heart was so great he had to bend over to stop it. He fell to his knees. A party guest stepped over him. Joe didn't even look up. He felt he was so sad that he was never going to be able to get up again. "Dad!" screamed Joe. He had never been this angry before. He hoped he never would be again. He ran into the pool room to confront his father. Mr. Spud nervously straightened his toupee as his son approached. Joe stood in front of his dad, hyperventilating. He was too angry to speak. I'm sorry, son. I thought that's what you wanted, a friend. I just wanted to make things better for you at school. I got that teacher you hated sacked too. All I had to do was buy the headmaster a motorbike. So, you got an old lady sacked from her job, and then you paid a girl to like me. I thought that's what you wanted. What? Listen, I can buy you another friend, said Mr. Spud. You don't get it, do you? Screamed Joe. Some things can't be bought. Like what? Like friendship, like feelings, like love. Actually, the last one can, offered Sapphire, still unable to lift her hand. I hate you, Dad, I really do, shouted Joe. Joe, please, pleaded Mr. Spud. Look, please calm down. How about a nice little check for $5 million? Oh, yes, please, said Sapphire. I don't want any more of your stupid money, sneered Joe. But son, spluttered Mr. Spud, the last thing I want to do is end up like you, a middle-aged man with some brain-dead teenage fiancé. Excuse me, but I passed my makeup exams, said Sapphire angrily. I never want to see either of you again, said Joe. He ran out of the room, pushing a lady out of his way and into the pool as he did. Then he slammed the huge door behind him. One of the mural tiles from Mr. Spud's thong fell off the wall and smashed onto the floor. Joe! Joe, wait, shouted Mr. Spud. Joe dodged past the hordes of guests and ran up to his room, shutting the door firmly behind him. There wasn't a lock, so he grabbed a chair and wedged it under the door handle so it wouldn't open. As the beat of the music thumped through the carpet, Joe grabbed a bag and started filling it with clothes. He didn't know where he was going, so he wasn't sure what he needed. All he knew was he didn't want to be in this ridiculous house for another minute. He grabbed a couple of his favorite books, The Boy in the Dress and Mr. Stink, both of which he found hilarious yet heartwarming. Then he looked on his shelf at all his expensive toys and gadgets. His eyes were drawn to the little loo-roll rocket that his dad had given him when he was still working at the factory. He remembered it was a present for his 8th birthday. His mum and dad were still together then, and Joe thought it might have been the last time he was truly happy. As his hand reached out to take it, there was a loud thump on the door. Son, let me in! Joe didn't say a word. He had nothing more he wanted to say to the man. Whoever his dad had been was lost years ago. Joe, please, said Mr. Spud. Then there was a pause. Thump. Joe's dad was trying to open the door. Open this door! Thump! I've given you everything. He was putting all his weight behind it now, and the chair legs heroically dug themselves deeper into the carpet. He made one last try. Thump! Joe then heard a much smaller thump as his dad gave in and leaned his body against the door. This was followed by a squeak as his bulk slid down the door and a few whimpering cries. Then the light in the gap under the door was blocked. His dad must have been slumped on the floor. Spud Jr. felt unbearably guilty. He knew all he needed to do to stop his dad's pain was open that door. He put his hand on the chair for a moment. If I open that door now, he thought, nothing is going to change. Joe took a deep breath, lifted his hand, grabbed his bag and walked to the window. He opened it slowly so his dad wouldn't hear, and then climbed onto the windowsill. Joe took one last look at his bedroom before jumping out into the darkness and a new chapter.